Actually, there are some studies they found L2 readers, when they process syntactic sentences, they are different than L1 readers. For example, there one study found L2 readers, when L2 learners, when they read sentences, they showed a more positive P600 than L1 readers. So P600 is an ERP component. It happened after the onset of stimuli around 600 milliseconds. A lot of studies have found P600 is very sensitive to syntactic processing, and the more positive P600 is related to syntactic processing difficulty. So the studies support L2 learners when they process sentences, they have difficulty in syntactic processing. So why we have this difficulty for L2 learners? When we use it seems weird. Okay, so when we use for this difficulty is about the syntactic representations of L2 learners. When they acquire the syntactic presentations, they are qualitatively different from L1 readers. This interpretation is based on findings from L2 learners and L1 learners. They use different memory systems to acquire syntactic rules. Especially for later L2 learners, they largely rely on explicit declarative memory. But for L1 learners, they learn the syntactic rules based on implicitly procedure memory. So I'm very interested in whether L2 learners, they can use implicit learning to develop their syntactic representation. So this is the first question I'm asking for this project, whether implicit learning increases production of some syntactic structures for second language learners. The second question is whether the production of syntactic structures are independent of semantic information. There are a lot of studies investigate the semantic representations and syntactic representations. There are arguments about that. One argument is about syntactic and semantic representations. They are separate from each other. But other argument said syntactic processing is not separable from semantic processing. For Chinese, this is especially interesting because Chinese grammar contains fewer surface cues to sentence structures. For example, in our Chinese system, we have less rich morphosyntactic system compared to other languages. So this might lead to a great weight on semantic cues during comprehension. And some research suggests that reading Chinese relies more on syntactic semantic processes, and also syntactic processes interact heavily with semantic processes. But those studies, most of them are based on comprehension. So we have fewer studies about production, whether the production of syntactic structures also related to semantic processes. So that's the second question I'm interested in. So based on the previous study, I asked 3 questions for this project. The first one is, does implicit learning increase spoken language production of Chinese dative constructions for CFL learners? So here I focus on dative constructions because this is a very basic and important constructions in language acquisition. It expresses the transfer of objects between 2 people. Also, here I mentioned implicit learning. I used structure priming paradigm. I will introduce it later. The second question is, does implicit learning affect production of 2 types of dative constructions similarly? So there are 2 types this study focuses on. The third question is production of Chinese dative construction, whether it is independent of semantic information. So to answer these 3 questions, we did the following manipulations. For the first question, whether implicit learning increase production of Chinese dative construction for CFL learners. We used the structural priming. Maybe you have heard about structural priming. So during language production, speakers, they are more likely to reuse the same structure you have just heard to make a new sentence. Even the event can be described in more than one way. For example, when you look at this picture, you describe what is happening here. If the speakers, they just listened a passive sentence, it's very likely the speakers might say the cat is chased by a dog rather than the dog chases the cat. So this is structural priming. Studies support structural priming reflects implicit learning of syntactic structures. We will hold this for a few minutes. When I introduce the procedure of this study, I will show you why structural priming reflects implicit learning. The second question is, does implicit learning affect production of 2 types of dative constructions similarly? So in this study, we focus on 2 types of dative constructions. One is prepositional dative construction, it's also PO. For example, in this sentence, 爷爷借了一把伞给男孩. The second type is double object dative construction, is also DO. 爷爷借给男孩一把伞. So we focus on these 2 types of dative constructions. For the third question is production of Chinese dative constructions independent of semantic information. So how do we measure semantic information? We used animacy to measure semantic information. So animacy include animate versus inanimate. So animate is described as alive or having life. So inanimate is the opposite. So animacy characterize the conceptual and semantic features of agents or patients. For example, here there are two words. One is 朋友, so it is animate. 工厂 is inanimate. So in our study, we manipulate the animacy of patients in the sentences to test the semantic information. So animacy is widely used to test the inferences of semantic information in language production, and also studies on Chinese found Chinese comprehenders use animacy as a cue for comprehension. So that's why we use semantic animacy as semantic information to test whether the syntactic representation is independent of semantic information. So to answer these three questions, we designed one study. So first, let's check the participants. We have 25 CFL learners from Sun Yat-sen University. So they all passed 5th level of HSK. They have lived in China for more than 2 years. Their language background is kind of diverse. It's a little bit difficult to help participants. They are from the same first language background. It's definitely better if we can control the first language backgrounds, because we know the similarity between your first language and the second language affect the second language learning of grammar or syntax. But for this study, we can't do that. We have participants from multiple language background, but for data analysis, we use linear mixed modeling, and we treated L1 background as a random factor. So this will help to take care of the L1 background inferences. So we used structural priming procedure. So here is why structural priming procedure can test implicit learning of syntactic structures. So we have 3 phases for this experiment. It's kind of complicated for this experiment. I hope I can walk you through. So because we want to test implicit learning, we don't want the participants to know the goal of this experiment. So we describe this experiment as a memory task. It's not about language production. So the first phase, participants, they see some pictures and words. We wanted to make sure the participants, they know all the names of the pictures, because we focus on production. That means for the test phase, the participants, they needed to make some sentences based on the picture. We want them to know the names of the picture. So this is the first step. All the pictures and the names of the pictures are from the words they have learned. But we also want to make sure they understand the name of the picture. So the second phase is to establish the cover story of the memory task. Participants were instructed to remember 20 sentences and 20 pictures. So here, each sentence goes with one picture. So there are 20 sets of sentence and pictures. I will show you some examples later. The phase 3 is the test phase. So we test the structural priming effect. So the whole experiment lasted 50 minutes. So here are the example of the procedure. It might be easier to understand the experiment. The phase 1 is participants self-paced learn 66 pictures. Here are some examples. First, they see a picture and there is a name of the picture on the screen. So this is yeah. And sorry. Okay. So after they remember or they recognize the word and the picture, they think they can associate the picture and the word. They can press a button, go to next one. For example, the second one is 男孩. After they remembered this, then go to a third one, Sam. So all those, as I mentioned earlier, all those words they have learned. Definitely, there are some words they might be difficult for some participants. So we had a pilot study. So some words like 警察, it's a little bit difficult for some participants. So we add pinyin or English translation for participants to learn the association for the between the picture and the words. So this is the first phase. So after the first phase, participants went to the second phase. The second phase is the memory task. Actually, this is a fake task. So there are 20 sets of sentences and pictures. So each set there is one sentence and one picture. So here is an example. First, the participants say the fixation, then they say a sentence. They need to remember this sentence. They can read it loud or silently. It's up to the participant. And during the experiment, so we did this experiment individually. So that means that when the participants had questions or they have some words they can't understand, they can ask the experimenter to explain to them. After they remember, if they think they have remembered this sentence, they can press a button. Then there is a fixation again. So they will see pictures on the screen. Sometimes there are two pictures, sometimes are three. This is one set. After one set, the second set started, then 500 millisecond fixation, and then a sentence, then a picture, like that. So participants are instructed to remember the sentences and the pictures. The third phase is to ask participants to recognize the sentences and the pictures that were memorized in phase 2. This is also a fake task because we don't want participants to know the goal of this experiment. So first they say this sentence, and before they make the judgment whether they have seen this sentence before, they have to read the sentence out loud. Then after that, they make the judgment whether they have seen this sentence in phase 2. After a sentence, there is a picture. So the participants need to describe the picture by completing the sentence beneath it. For example, here the picture, there is a girl and a piano. They have learned all these words in phase 1. They know a girl and a piano. So they finish this sentence is 女孩弹钢琴. So they have to complete this sentence and then make the judgment whether they have seen this picture in phase 2. So why do we ask them to do this? Because here is the priming effect comes. So the first sentence actually is the prime sentence. The picture is the priming effect. If the first sentence effect has structural priming, it affects the production of the picture. Is it clear here? This part is kind of the core part of this design.
Yeah, I have one question. So after they see 学生打篮球, then they see this picture. The only way they can say is 女孩弹钢琴. There's no way they can say 钢琴弹女孩, right?
Yes.
What is the other choice they have? They can only say this structure.
Yeah, correct. So this example, they are failures. So they are failures. So they all have simple SVO structures. For this study, we focus on dative structures, right? So they are the real trials we care about. Here are they. So we have 20 target trials. So those pictures can be described with dative constructions. It can go either PO or DO. For example, the first one is 爷爷借了一把伞给男孩 or 爷爷借给男孩一把伞. The second picture can be described 女孩送了一束花给画家 女孩送给画家一束花. So these 20 target trials, they can be described in both PO and DO. So that's why the prime sentences are important. We try to figure out whether the prime sentence affect the production for the picture. So as you say, we have two objects in dative constructions, but we shift the position of two objects. For example, in the first picture, the boy is before umbrella, but in the second picture, flower is before the painter. So it's try to control the order effect. If you always put the boy before the umbrella or the painter before the flower, participants might be affected by this order. So we have these 20 target trials. As I said, the prime sentences are very important. So there are 5 conditions. So you can say DO, PO, and baseline. So that means before they see this picture, they see the sentence first. They repeat the sentence and then complete the sentence beneath the picture. So also we are interested in whether the syntactic processing is independent of semantic information. So that's why we have AN and IN. So AN means animate, IN means inanimate. So this is the manipulation of semantic information. So for example, the object 朋友 here is animate, 工厂 is inanimate. We also have a baseline condition. So what's this for? This is for the prime sentence. It's very simple. It's the simple SVO structure. When you see this picture, which one do you choose? It's PO or DO. It's like a natural production without priming. So that's why we have these 5 conditions. Is it clear here? If you have any questions, just let me know. It's kind of complicated because we don't want participants to know the goal of this experiment. Oh, I forget to say, during the test phase, the phase 3, we have 60 sets of failures. So 60 sets of failures and 20 sets of real trials we care about. So it's like 1/3. The participants, they won't know this is about dative constructions. So all the failures, they have simple SVO. Here are the results.
Sorry， 打扰一下，前面有一个问题，你可以回到前面那一页吗
OK，
就是这个地方animacy versus inanimacy， 就是你们处理这个 semantic 这一块的这个为了做这个区分而有这个 animacy versus inanimacy 这个设置吗？
对对对。
那为什么这个地方就是说这个 animacy 和 inanimacy 会就是怎么说呢？是在语义上的一个区分呢？因为这两个句子它都是这个语法上是合理的，是可以被接受的，对不对？那么这个地方我就没有搞清楚为什么这个 animacy 这个是 stands in for semantic。
因为词的这种 animacy 其实是跟它的语义相关的，是吧？其实这个地方的语义并不是我们通常以为的那种 lexical 的那种语义。在前面可以看一下在这个地方，其实就是用 animacy 来做这种语义的，作为语义信息，其实是在做 production 里边是 language production 里边是用的比较多的。当然你说的如果是 lexical 的那种的话也有做，就是因为 semantic information 可以有不同的层次吧。它也可以是就是完全一个词是一样的，比如说你听到这个句子，这个词是一模一样的，跟你接下来 会不会影响到你的 production， 也有这方面的研究。在这里我们是选择了用 animacy 作为semantic information 的一个指标，当然也可以有其他的指标。
OK， 那我可以等一下再看到你们的结果再来讨论这个问题，因为这个地方从现在这里看来，就是对我来说，这个 animacy 与否，好像对我对这个词是不是能够对这个句子是不是能够被接受，或者是学生是否能够顺利产出这个句子，好像没有直接的关系，在这里看来，但是我当然不知道你们最后的结果是怎么样。OK， 那我就再等你讲完那个结果部分再来讨论吧。
可以。
对，我插一句，如果大家有问题可以 jump in， 因为我觉得如果 jump in to ask a question， 我们反而会让就是做 presentation 的老师不是很紧张。
对，可以的，因为这个实验程序有点麻烦所以就是我觉得可能在这个过程中会有一些问题
然后大家如果在最后要提问也可以，都可以。
OK， 那我们back to the results. So this is the responses. So PO, DO, or others. So it's the production based on the picture, whether they use the PO structure or DO structure or others. The rules are the prime sentences before the picture. So you can say it's POAN, POIN, DOAN, DOIN, and the baseline. We have 5 conditions. So the first finding is more PO responses follow PO prime sentences than baseline sentences. The second finding is learners, they didn't produce more sentences of DO structure following DO sentences. So it's like here. These are the prime sentences. This is DO response. Learners, they also produced more sentences of PO structure than DO structure. So this is the percentage of PO structure. Let's review the responses, the total responses of this study. So we have 20 sets of test trials. We have 25 participants. So that means there are 500 sentences we analyzed, and we have 5 conditions. So that means under each condition, the number is 100. So if you put this together, it's 100. 钱老师有问题吗？
Have you tested native speakers? I'm wondering about native speakers. Do they also produce more PO than DO structures or not?
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, that is true. Okay.
Yeah. So even for native Chinese speakers, they produced more PO than DO.
Okay.
So here is the percentage for PO. Learners, they produced more PO structures than DO structures. And also, we didn't see animacy showed a main effect here. It's here. 于老师 yeah. Okay. Back to your question.
这里看起来好像没有任何差异，是不是？如果我没有看错的话。
animacy 是没有出现效应的。Okay, so the discussion. So the structural priming indicated that implicit learning could prompt production of Chinese dative constructions for CFL learners. And also the outcome of implicit learning is limited. Only PO structures, but not DO structures showed structural priming. One possibility is that DO structure is more difficult to acquire. So I'm not sure this is correct. Haven't taught Chinese for a while, so I'm not sure this conclusion, but based on previous studies, they support DO structure is more difficult. And animacy didn't show an effect on structural priming, suggesting the syntactic representation may be independent of semantic representations. At least animacy doesn't affect production of syntactic structures here. Let's go back to the 3 research questions. The first, does implicit learning increase production of Chinese dative construction for CF learners? The answer is yes, because we found PO structural priming effect. The second question, does implicit learning affect production of 2 types, PO and DO? Similarly, actually it's no. PO structure has bigger structural priming effect, but DO doesn't. The third question is the production of Chinese dative construction independent of semantic information. Here we didn't find the animacy effect, so the answer is yes. So based on this study, there might be some teaching applications. So the first one is implicit learning could increase syntactic production for CFL learners, even they don't know, they don't explicitly know what they are doing. This is a memory task, but they also showed structural priming. The second is the effectiveness of implicit learning varies based on the type of syntactic structure like PO and DO. The third one is the order of explicit learning and implicit learning might matter for syntactic acquisition. For this study, we used implicit learning, but before this experiment, the participants, they have learned PO and DO structures explicitly. So, so implicit learning is after explicit learning. So we are not sure if participants, they learn the syntactic structure implicitly first, whether it will change the results. So that's this project. And thank you very much. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, so now we will welcome questions. You can either type in the chat box, then I will read to Dr. Chen, or you can just turn on your camera, then speak up.
接着我可以接着再问一下刚才那个 animacy 的问题。我为什么问呢？因为我觉得在像你做这样的研究里面，当然我没有做过这样的研究，但只是